Have you ever spent 6 months hiding from someone, ducking into stairwells, eating lunch in your car, and timing your bathroom breaks just to avoid crossing paths with one person? Only to discover that the universe had been laughing at you the entire time, setting up the most elaborate cosmic joke imaginable? What if the person you feared most in your professional life turned out to be the one person who could change everything about your personal life? Stay until the end, because what happened next still gives me chills every time I think about it. And if you enjoy stories about fate, love, and the beautiful chaos of life, hit that like button and subscribe, because this community is built on stories that remind us that sometimes, the things we run from are exactly what we need to run toward. My name is Daniel Chen, and for 28 years, I thought I had life figured out. I had a system. I had routines. I had carefully constructed walls that kept me safe from the chaos that had defined my childhood. I was a senior software developer at Meridian Tech, a company that had grown from a scrappy startup to a major player in the fintech industry. I was good at my job. Exceptional, even. But there was one thing I wasn't good at: people. Especially one person. Victoria Sterling. The name alone sent a shiver down my spine every time I heard it echo through the office halls. She had taken over as CEO 18 months ago, after the company's founder retired. At 34, she was one of the youngest CEOs in the industry, and she had a reputation that preceded her like thunder before a storm. Cold. Calculating. Demanding. The kind of leader who could reduce a senior executive to tears with a single raised eyebrow. I had witnessed it myself during my first month under her leadership. Marcus Webb, a 15-year veteran of the company and head of our product development team, had presented a quarterly report with a 3% deviation from projected targets. Victoria had listened in complete silence, her face unreadable, and then she had asked one question. Just one. Is 3% the standard of excellence we're building this company on? Marcus had stammered. He had tried to explain market conditions, unforeseen complications, supply chain issues. Victoria had simply stood up, collected her things, and said, "I expect a revised strategy on my desk by Monday. One that reflects why I should continue investing in this department." Marcus had resigned 2 weeks later. After that, I made it my mission to stay as far away from Victoria Sterling as humanly possible while still remaining employed. I learned her schedule. I knew which elevator she preferred, which hallways she walked, which meetings she attended. I became a ghost in my own workplace, productive and invisible. My co-workers thought I was paranoid. My best friend at the office, Jasmine, called it survival instinct gone haywire. "She's not going to fire you for existing, Daniel," Jasmine would say during our lunch breaks, which I insisted we take at exactly 11:30 a.m. because Victoria always ate at noon. "You don't understand," I would reply. "She sees everything. She notices everything. And I am not about to be noticed." What I never told Jasmine, what I never told anyone, was the real reason I feared Victoria Sterling so much. It wasn't just her reputation. It wasn't just the stories of firings and demotions. It was something much more personal, something rooted in the deepest parts of my history. Victoria Sterling reminded me of my mother. My mother, Dr. Helen Chen, had been a brilliant woman. A renowned surgeon who had built her career on precision, discipline, and an absolute refusal to accept anything less than perfection. She had applied those same standards to her children. To me. Every grade that wasn't an A was a failure. Every second-place finish was a reminder that first place existed. Every tear was weakness. Every stumble was unacceptable. I spent my entire childhood trying to be invisible in my own home, trying to avoid her sharp eyes and sharper words. I learned to anticipate her moods, to calculate her expectations, to move through life without making waves. When she died of a heart attack during my junior year of college, I felt something I never admitted to anyone. Relief. And then guilt for feeling that relief. And then a profound emptiness because I realized I had spent so many years trying to avoid her that I never actually knew her. I never knew why she was the way she was. I never asked about her dreams, her fears, her regrets. That guilt shaped me. It made me the person who avoided conflict at all costs, who stayed silent in meetings, who preferred code to conversations because code never judged you. Code never made you feel small. So when Victoria Sterling walked into Meridian Tech with her piercing gaze and her impossible standards, every survival instinct I had developed since childhood kicked into overdrive. For 6 months, my strategy worked perfectly. I was promoted twice, recognized for my technical contributions through email commendations that never required face-to-face interaction. I was thriving in the shadows. And then my sister happened. "You need to start dating again," Michelle said during our weekly video call. She was 3 years older than me, married with 2 kids, and absolutely convinced that my happiness depended on finding a romantic partner. "I date," I protested weakly. "Daniel, your last relationship ended 2 years ago. And it lasted 3 months. That's not dating. That's barely an extended handshake." She wasn't wrong. After my ex-girlfriend Sarah had told me I was emotionally unavailable and impossible to really know, I had retreated further into my comfortable solitude. Dating required vulnerability. Vulnerability required risk. Risk led to pain. The equation was simple. "I'm setting you up on a blind date," Michelle announced. "Absolutely not. Too late. It's already arranged. Saturday night, 7 p.m., that Italian restaurant downtown, Bellini's. Her name is Tori. She's a friend of my friend Camille's. Successful, smart, recently out of a long-term relationship and looking for something real. She specifically asked for someone genuine, someone who isn't about playing games." "Michelle, I don't." "You're going." "I already gave her your number. She'll text you." "Don't mess this up, little brother." She hung up before I could argue further. The text came 3 hours later, from an unknown number. *Hi Daniel. This is Tori. Michelle's friend gave me your number. I know blind dates can be awkward, but I promise I'm relatively normal. Looking forward to Saturday if you're still interested. Despite my reservations, something about the message made me smile. It was self-aware. Slightly self-deprecating. Human. I found myself typing back before I could overthink it. Hi Tori. I'm told I'm also relatively normal, though my sister might dispute that. Saturday works for me. Should I make the reservation or do you prefer to handle it? Already done. I'm a bit of a control freak about reservations. Hope that's okay. That's perfect. One less thing to stress about. Exactly. See you Saturday, Daniel. Over the next few days, we exchanged more messages. Nothing too deep, just the gentle probing of 2 strangers trying to determine if they might actually like each other. She told me she worked in business, which I assumed meant something in the corporate world. I told her I worked in tech, specifically development. She mentioned loving old movies, particularly anything from the 1940s. I admitted my guilty pleasure was reality cooking shows. There's something honest about watching people fail at making soufflés, she wrote. It reminds me that perfection is overrated. That line stuck with me. Perfection is overrated. I had spent my entire life either chasing perfection or hiding from people who demanded it. Here was someone who seemed to understand that maybe the chase itself was the problem. By Friday night, I was actually looking forward to Saturday. For the first time in years, I felt something that resembled hope. Saturday arrived, and I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to decide between a blue button-down and a gray one. I finally settled on blue, because Jasmine once told me it brought out my eyes, and I needed all the help I could get. Bellini's was a cozy restaurant with exposed brick walls, soft lighting, and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, which was typical for me, and was led to a corner table with 2 place settings. At exactly 7 p.m., the door opened. And my entire world tilted on its axis. Walking toward me, in a burgundy dress that was nothing like her usual corporate attire, with her hair down in soft waves instead of her signature severe bun, was Victoria Sterling. My CEO. The woman I had spent 6 months treating like she was a natural disaster to be avoided at all costs. She spotted me at the same moment I spotted her. I watched her confident stride falter, her eyes widen, her lips part in what I could only describe as complete and utter shock. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she laughed. It was nothing like I expected. It wasn't sharp or mocking or cold. It was genuine and a little bit embarrassed and surprisingly warm. "Daniel Chen," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You're my blind date." "Miss Sterling," I managed to say, my voice strangled. This is a disaster," she offered, but she was still smiling. I was going to say unexpected. "I'm going to kill Camille," she muttered, shaking her head. "She set this up. She knows exactly who works for me. This has to be intentional." My brain was still trying to process the situation. Torai. Torai was short for Victoria. Of course it was. How had I not connected those dots? "I can leave," I said, already reaching for my wallet. "I completely understand if this is inappropriate. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, and I certainly don't want there to be any professional implications." "Daniel." Her voice cut through my rambling, firm but not unkind. "Sit down." I sat. "I'm not going to pretend this isn't complicated," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But I've been looking forward to this dinner all week. You were different in our texts. Genuine. That's rare in my experience." "I didn't know it was you," I admitted. "Obviously." A small smile played at her lips. "You wouldn't have been so relaxed if you did. You've been avoiding me for 6 months, you know." The blood drained from my face. "You noticed?" "I notice everything, Daniel. It's my job. You take the stairs when I take the elevator. You eat lunch an hour before everyone else. You volunteer for every remote project that keeps you off my radar." She tilted her head, studying me with those sharp eyes that had terrified me for months. "What I never understood was why. Your work is excellent. You have nothing to fear from me." The waiter appeared, mercifully giving me time to compose myself. We ordered wine and appetizers, and when he left, Victoria, Tori, was still waiting for an answer. "You remind me of someone," I finally said. "Someone from my past. Someone I could never be enough for." The words hung in the air between us. "Your mother," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I stared at her. "How did you know?" "Because I've heard that before." She took a long sip of water. "From my sister. From my ex-fiancé. From friends I no longer have. You're not the first person to see my professional demeanor and assume it's all I am. I've been told I'm cold, intimidating, impossible to please. I've been compared to people's worst memories." She paused, and something vulnerable flickered across her face. "It's the loneliest feeling in the world, being reduced to a reputation." The confession hit me somewhere deep. In all my months of avoidance, I had never once considered that Victoria Sterling might be lonely. That the pedestal of power she stood on might actually be a prison. "I'm sorry," I said. "I made assumptions. I created a version of you in my head based on fear, not reality." "You're not entirely wrong," she admitted. "I am demanding. I do have high standards. But there's a difference between expecting excellence and being cruel. I learned that difference the hard way. What do you mean? She was quiet for a moment, tracing the rim of her wine glass with one finger. My father was a lot like what you probably imagine I am. Everything was never enough. Every success was followed by a question about the next one. I spent my entire childhood trying to earn his approval, and I never did. He died when I was 26, and his last words to me were about a business deal he thought I could have negotiated better. The parallel to my own story was almost painful. I swore I would never be like him, she continued. But somewhere along the way, I confused strength with hardness. I thought that if I never showed vulnerability, no one could hurt me the way he did. I built walls, Daniel. The same way you built yours. We sat in silence for a moment, two strangers who had somehow stumbled into each other's deepest wounds. So what do we do now? I asked. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. We have dinner. We talk. We pretend, just for tonight, that we're not CEO and employee. We're just Tori and Daniel. Two people who might actually understand each other. That dinner changed everything. We talked for 4 hours. The restaurant staff had to gently inform us they were closing. We covered everything, our childhoods, our fears, our dreams, the paths that had led us to this impossible moment. I told her about my mother, about the guilt I still carried, about how I had spent my life trying to be invisible because invisibility felt safe. She told me about the expectations that came with being a woman in leadership, about how every decision was scrutinized differently, about how she had sacrificed relationships and friendships in the pursuit of success that was supposed to feel more fulfilling than it did. Do you ever regret it? I asked. The choices you made to get here? Every day, she admitted. And never. It's complicated. I'm proud of what I've built. But I'm tired of building it alone. When we finally left the restaurant, the city was quiet and the stars were visible above the urban glow. This was not what I expected tonight to be, I said. Better or worse? I thought about it. Different. In the best possible way. She laughed again, that warm sound that I was rapidly becoming addicted to. I have a confession. I asked Camille to set me up because I was tired of dating people who only saw my title. I wanted someone who would see me as just Tori. But I never thought that person would be someone who already knew my title and chose to look past it. I didn't choose anything, I said honestly. Fate chose. Or Michelle. I'm still not sure which. Maybe they're the same thing. We stood there on the sidewalk, two people who had spent months existing in the same space without ever really seeing each other. I want to see you again, she said. But I need you to understand what that means. It's complicated. There will be questions, complications, professional considerations. I won't ask you to hide, but I also won't force you into a situation you're not prepared for. I've spent my whole life hiding, I said. Maybe it's time to try something different. The next few months were the most terrifying and exhilarating of my life. We kept our relationship private at first, not out of shame but out of respect for the complexity of our situation. We had dinner at her apartment, where I discovered she couldn't cook to save her life but made excellent cocktails. We took weekend trips to small towns where nobody knew either of us. We slowly, carefully, learned to trust each other with the parts of ourselves we had kept hidden from the world. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be truly seen by another person. Victoria, Tori, didn't want me to be perfect. She didn't expect me to have all the answers. She just wanted me to be present, to be honest, to show up even when it was scary. And I did the same for her. I learned that behind the CEO exterior was a woman who cried during sad movies, who had a secret obsession with gardening, who worried constantly that she wasn't doing enough for the people who worked for her. I'm terrified of becoming my father, she told me one night, her head resting on my chest. Every decision I make, I wonder if I'm hurting people the way he hurt me. You're not him, I promised. You're trying to be better. That's the difference. But of course, nothing stays private forever. The rumors started slowly. Someone noticed that Victoria smiled more often during meetings. Someone else noticed that I no longer bolted for the exits whenever she entered a room. The office gossip machine, as it always does, began to turn. 3 months into our relationship, we were confronted with a choice. There's talk, Victoria told me during a quiet dinner at her place. HR has received anonymous complaints about potential conflicts of interest. Someone wants to know why you've received 2 promotions in the past year. My stomach dropped. My work speaks for itself. The promotions were merit-based. I know that. You know that. But perception is reality in the corporate world. If we keep this hidden, it looks like we have something to hide. If we go public, every decision I've ever made regarding you will be scrutinized. What do you want to do? She looked at me with those eyes that had once terrified me and now felt like home. I want to stop hiding. But only if you're ready for what comes next. I thought about all the years I had spent invisible, all the relationships I had sabotaged because vulnerability felt too risky, all the walls I had built to protect myself from pain that found me anyway. I'm ready, I said. Going public was exactly as complicated as we had feared. There were investigations to ensure that my promotions had been properly documented and approved by other executives. There were whispers in the hallways. There were people who assumed the worst and people who celebrated what they saw as a romance novel come to life. The hardest part was the board meeting. Victoria had to address the relationship formally, to answer questions about how decisions would be made going forward to avoid any appearance of favoritism. I waited outside the conference room for 3 hours, my anxiety climbing with every passing minute. When she finally emerged, her face was unreadable. Well? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They're not happy, she said slowly. But they acknowledge that you've never reported directly to me, that your promotions went through proper channels, and that our relationship began outside of work. And? A slow smile spread across her face. And they said that if they fired every executive who had ever dated a colleague, they wouldn't have a company left to run. Relief flooded through me, so intense that I had to lean against the wall for support. We're okay? I asked. We're more than okay. She took my hand, right there in the hallway where anyone could see. We're finally free. 1 year later, I stood in front of our closest friends and family and watched Victoria walk toward me in a simple white dress, her face radiant with a joy I had never seen in the intimidating CEO I once feared. Our wedding was small. Jasmine was there, still in shock that her paranoid friend had ended up marrying the woman he used to hide from. Michelle was there, taking full credit for the entire relationship. Camille, who had orchestrated the blind date, gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. But the moment that stayed with me, the moment that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, was during the ceremony itself. Victoria had written her own vows, and as she spoke them, I realized how far we had both come. Daniel, she said, her voice steady but her eyes glistening, you taught me that strength isn't about building walls. It's about having the courage to let them down. You saw the person I was so afraid to show the world, and you didn't run away. You stayed. For the first time in my life, I understand that being seen is not dangerous. Being seen is the whole point. When it was my turn, I spoke from a place I had kept locked away for as long as I could remember. Victoria, you taught me that the things we run from are often the things we need most. I spent my whole life trying to be invisible, convinced that if no one really knew me, no one could reject me. But invisibility isn't safety. It's just another kind of loneliness. You made me want to be seen. You made me believe I was worth seeing. I'm done hiding, Tori. With you, I finally want to be found. The message I want to leave you with is this: the things that terrify us often carry the greatest gifts. I was so sure that Victoria Sterling was my greatest professional threat. I was convinced that she represented everything I had spent my life running from. But the truth was far more beautiful and far more complex. She was a mirror, reflecting back the parts of myself I refused to examine. She was a door, opening to a life I never believed I deserved. She was the universe's way of saying that sometimes, the greatest love stories begin with the people we're most afraid to meet. If you're hiding from something right now, a conversation, a relationship, an opportunity that feels too risky, I want you to consider the possibility that your fear is pointing you toward exactly what you need. The walls we build to protect ourselves often become the prisons that trap us. And the only way out is through. I almost missed the love of my life because I was too busy running from a ghost that existed only in my own mind. Don't make the same mistake. Take the risk. Have the conversation. Show up for the blind date. You never know. The person you've been avoiding might just be the person who changes everything. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We share stories like this every week, stories about love, courage, and the beautiful unpredictability of life. Leave a comment telling me about a time when something you feared turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best things in life are hiding in the places we're most afraid to look.